Okay, let's see. All right, we are, like I mentioned, talking about monitoring and alerting today, which are critical topics inside of any continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline. Because without monitoring and observability, engineers are less prepared when it comes to troubleshooting, investigating, and correcting any failures or issues that might occur. With monitoring and alerting, you're able to not only have better logging and visibility on your apps, but with this, you're also able to set up some, let's say, better practices, right? So service level management, for example, is a site reliability engineering practice that essentially improves communication between teams by establishing uh, objectives and having laid out agreements over how to respond when these objectives are not met. Likewise, incident management is another SRE practice that is heavily dependent on proper monitoring and alerting. So monitoring and alerting is really critical in making sure that your response time to any potential failures is optimal so that you minimize the time that users may be experiencing issues with your app and you minimize any downtime where the application itself may no longer be able to make money or any profits because of critical failures. So let's kind of blaze through this. This first lesson here is really just a lot of basic concepts and terminologies about monitoring. I don't think any of it is too complex. So take some time on your own today to read through this a little more in depth. But basically, we are talking about different components to monitoring, right? Monitoring might seem simple, but don't ever underestimate an engineering team's ability to over-engineer anything, right? At its core, monitoring really is the collection of metrics and the analysis and visualization of those metrics. So metrics will include things like success rates, error rates, response times, latency. And these metrics can help establish a baseline in which you know over time that your application is supposed to perform and meet. And when it happens to fall outside of that baseline, this is when you can trigger events or alerts that will activate the appropriate behaviors or notify the right people. So different types of monitoring. We've got application monitoring, infrastructure monitoring. At its core, there's really not too much of a difference between the two. It's you're essentially applying the same practice, right, of collecting metrics and then responding to these metrics, but just to a different part of your tech stack. So one, you're dealing with an application, another, you're dealing more with like the infrastructure, the platform on which your applications are set up. Security monitoring, we won't really be talking about as much, but that's going to monitor for vulnerabilities and is really more of like a cybersecurity area of concern. And user monitoring is not so much concerned with failures as it is with in things like engagement, right? Or if users are able to get through the user journey in the right way. So this may not always be a result of technical failures, but more let's say confusing or impractical design, right? Inefficient design. Tools that can help with this are things like Full Story. Let's see if they have a demo. Full Story is really cool. It allows you to essentially um, track user experiences over a website. So you're able to see a user sign into a website, an app, and actually run through that app as well. So you'll see in real time, well, not real time, but you'll have a recording of that user's activity in real time, like how they were navigating the application, what they were clicking on, and not only what they were clicking on visually, but also what was happening under the hood as they were clicking on and interacting with things. I was hoping there'd be a video on here. I guess not. It's really cool stuff. Datadog's equivalent would be real user monitoring. A lot of different tools for monitoring and observability will have different implementations of this, but that in a nutshell is user monitoring. So we talked a bit about how monitoring is really just the collection and analysis of metrics. That's essentially what we're seeing here as well. It's just data collection, data storage, data analysis, and the visualization of that data. And again, a lot of these platforms have the tools that you need to visualize this data in different ways. If we look at CloudWatch, for example, we see that when we are creating dashboards, we have the option of, let's actually just go to one of these dashboards and add a new one. We have the option of selecting from different types of widgets, right? And these can allow you, it gives you the flexibility to design your dashboard in a way that best suits your needs and your use case. Other tools that allow for this are tools like Grafana, which in my opinion, has gotten slightly worse and worse with each major version and release, but it still has like a lot of like really cool stuff, right? It allows you to do all sorts of create all sorts of dashboards that will display your data in different ways and will also allow for the querying of data and data subsets in a way that different users and different teams can really benefit from. So these are overall, they do have similarities, like there's similarities between Grafana and Datadog and how they allow you to create dashboards and how they visualize data, but they also have sort of finer nuanced differences that will make one better than the other in a specific use case. You don't have to concern yourself with what to use because most likely wherever you land, you'll be using whatever software that the team is already beholden to. So just be mindful of that and be prepared to learn as you go. Though a lot of these tools at their core operate in pretty much the same way. So talked a little bit about the importance of monitoring DevOps, how it allows you to detect issues, allows you to resolve issues more quickly. Overall, it improves performance and reliability, as well as resiliency. Reliability being how stable an application is, right? Like it's essentially its uptime, whereas resiliency is more the concern of how resilient the application is to future issues, future incidents. Somewhat similar, but still distinctly different topics, especially when you're working in an organization that embraces site reliability engineering practices and philosophies. So things to monitor. Application response time, that's a good one. Error/success rates. Basically the number of times a request, an API request will succeed or fail. So generally you'll want to stay above a certain percentage, but at the same time, you can't expect engineers to jump on every single failure that occurs, right? A lot of times you'll figure out over time what the right threshold is for a particular service or API within an application. It's just impossible for engineers to have the bandwidth to investigate every little thing. And there are many, many times where an issue is not even within the responsibility of, let's say, an organization, right? Like user error is a big cause for burning time, and a lot of times users just won't know any better. They might not be technically savvy enough to be able to troubleshoot, and that's when they go to customer service, which then opens up a ticket for tech support. And without, this is another reason why it's great to have proper observability and monitoring, because with proper observability and monitoring, you can help identify issues much more quickly, particularly issues where there is no problem with application, right? Like if a customer is complaining about not being able to hit a website, but you have, let's say, a monitor set up inside 24/7 that's telling you that the application is up and is in perfect health, then you can infer the issue is on the customers, and that's something that we just have no control over. Any questions on monitoring? Cool. All right, so you've already played around with CloudWatch a bit, especially for your assessments. In assessment one, you had to utilize a Python script to drive up the CPU utilization on an EC2. And you saw that with your CloudWatch alarm, you could trigger an email to be sent to you using AWS's simple notification service. So let's go to CloudWatch and actually talk through this. When you're in CloudWatch and you're setting up, let's say a widget, right, for your metrics. In this case, we're tracking the CPU utilization of an EC2 over time. And we have another widget here that will just give us a percentage. So at a quick glance, we'll have a better idea of just how close we are hitting to our threshold. We can, from here, set alarms and alerts that will interact with different resources and features inside of AWS, like the SNS queue to trigger an email. So if we look at the alarms we have set up here, we can see for our demo, right now it's saying insufficient data. Looks like, well, it looks good, actually. I'm not sure exactly why it's saying it's insufficient data when we could clearly see the data here. But we are way below our threshold, so we are essentially in a good state. And here, if we go to the Actions tab, we can see that we've set this to notify, specifically to send a message to the demo-cw-alarm-alert topic, which itself is configured to send an email. So all of this should look familiar. What will be new is creating this inside of Terraform, because as DevOps engineers, infrastructure as code is something you'll want to not only embrace, but sell other engineers on. Essentially, it's part of your responsibility as a DevOps engineer is to sell the culture, really. So here we see that we can create a resource called AWS _CloudWatch _dashboard. We are giving it a name. We are giving the resource a name, and then we're also giving the dashboard a name that we would see inside of the AWS console. We specify a body using JSON and code, and in this body, we're able to specify the widgets that we want, all in a clean JSON syntax. So we have a simple metric widget, which was that line chart that we saw. And then we also have a percentage widget that will show us at a quick glance exactly how close we are to reaching our threshold. So notice that we have a dynamic variable here that allows us to reference a particular instance that we've either created in Terraform or that we're able to load again through that Terraform. So here we are setting, oh, it looks like I need to update this. I had my example using East 1, but we could set a period, like how many hours, and we could set the kind of stat we want to use. In this case, an average. We give it a name, and we specify the kind of view. So here we have a single value to give us a percentage, and we have a time series to give us a line graph. So that's creating an alarm through, or sorry, a dashboard through Terraform. Likewise, when you're creating an alarm, you should already know how to create an alarm. It's something that we've all done for our first assessment. And in Terraform, it's actually a little simpler than the dashboard itself. So we have, this is the script, by the way, that should look familiar as well. That's a script to test the CPU utilization. We're talking about running chmod to make that executable. And then in Terraform, first we're creating an SNS topic. All we need to pass in is a name. We are then specifying a subscription. And in this case, we are saying we want to utilize an email protocol. And the endpoint for that protocol is the email that we want to send to. So with that specified, we can now also specify the alarm using AWS_CloudWatch metric alarm. And we are able to set the exact same things we would be setting inside of the console wizard, right? Your operator is going to be greater than, less than, greater than, or equal to. You also want to specify your evaluation period, which in this case is every minute, name for the metric, and a period, as well as a threshold that you want to set for your alarm. So if we go above this number, because we're selecting greater than or equal to, then we will trigger an alert. So with that, today's challenge, you'll be walking through creating some alarms and dashboards, but utilizing Terraform. And EventBridge, which was formerly CloudWatch Events, is just another way of creating additional monitoring and alerting. And in a way, it's a little more, I guess, dynamic. It allows for you to create monitoring over multiple AWS resources, for example, right? And it allows you to even trigger actions that are, let's say, maybe more complex than just a simple alert. Like you could trigger a Lambda to act in a certain situation. Let's say, for example, if we were monitoring CPU utilization, we can trigger, let's say maybe we know exactly what service is causing that increase in utilization. We could trigger a Lambda that might shut off that service or something along those lines. So in here we have a demo or an example of how you could use EventBridge to, let's say, backup data. So let's go over to EventBridge actually, and let's take a look at what this console looks like. So when you get to EventBridge, you can, just like in CloudWatch, set up dashboards. But in your dashboards, you're able to set up different rules. So in this case, we have one rule enabled, and it's set to work off of a schedule. Let's take a look at what it does. So You set a rate at which this will run using, you could either use a very basic, simple expression, or you could use a cron expression. So if you remember, cron is basically a universal way for specifying at what intervals an action can occur at. So if you need help to write your expression, you could always use tools like cron, tab, guru. But after a while, you might get the hang of writing cron all on your own. So in this case, for example, if we want this to trigger at midnight every day, we would specify at the 0 minute of the 0 hour. And then we want this to occur every day of the month, every month, and every year. This interface will complain if you set both your day of the week and your day of the month. So in this case, I think we would use a question mark and see now we have some trigger dates actually generating, and we're able to move forward. So once you have that set, you could then set a target. The target is basically what the EventBridge resource service is going to trigger when either you meet that scheduled time or a certain event triggers your rule. So let's actually backtrack a bit because I didn't talk about that. I said that you had the option of scheduling your pattern, but you could also, if I think it would go back here. Yeah, here we go. We could, instead of using a schedule, use an event pattern. So an event pattern will allow us to have an action trigger in response to another action or another event or another pattern. And here, if you were to set up an event pattern, you would just select a source and you would select that provider, and then you would provide the necessary data. So we don't really have anything that we could use right now. So let's just go back to our scheduled example, which I think is right here. And let's say, for example, you wanted to back up your database every day at midnight, right? We've already got our cron expression in there, so it's doing its thing. We can then select, let's see, we could either set up a Lambda to trigger that, or it would probably be simpler to just select. How did I do this earlier? I'm kind of blanking on what I was doing earlier. For this demo, let's see, what did I say here? So when creating a rule, you have the option of triggering from an event or a schedule. Let's try a schedule, and then, yeah, that's definitely missing something. Select RDS and type snapshot to the search. It's not bad. Oh, that's the wrong tab. Um, that was it. Oh, here, I think this was the original example. You could select an EBS snapshot, and if you were to have this be the target set to the cron schedule, then the snapshot would be created every day at midnight. But yes, as you can see, you could customize this to do a lot of different things. And what you have it do will really depend on your use case. So with that, that's essentially everything for EventBridge. I think I need a few minutes to finish going through the assignment. I think it still needs a bit of editing. I don't even see it here, but I'll have that up in like 15 minutes and everyone can go ahead, take a break for now. And once I have that up, then I'll open up breakout rooms for anyone that's ready to give their presentation. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Cool.
Best thing I heard all day.
I dig the enthusiasm.
Yeah. Hey, gotta give it when you can. Gotta lighten up the mood, right?
Yeah, for sure.